Well, thank you very much. Everyone, I appreciate your time tonight and glad that you guys have been able to sit through this workshop. I think it was really great information. I hope to just kind of follow up at the end and give you kind of my thoughts. Just a little bit about who I am. So, my name's Michael. I've been a financial advisor for over 25 years. And through my journey, I was blessed with a son, Dylan, who had special needs. And I kind of had to figure all this out on my own. And along those journeys, I was able to work a lot with the ARC and sharing this information with other families and other organizations. And so I hope you guys pick up a few things tonight. I know I have already that I didn't know. So I sit as a parent and think about what is it that we need to do? How do we start? Where do we go from here? And I think a very important thing is what's called a letter of intent. And it's really kind of an idea of getting your thoughts and your hopes and your dreams and your goals and kind of what the day in a life is like for your loved one. And I think that gives a lot of guidance to advisors like Bavik and Sandy and Brianne and everyone that works with families and Casey on how do we do the best job we can to kind of guide you and give you the best advice. So one of the things that we think about is how do we calculate their future financial need and looking at like what are their routines, what are the programs and activities that we work with that are going to be expenses that are not covered by services and programs through the government and organizations and things of that nature, but also where their income stream is going to come from. Are they going to get SSI once mom and dad pass away, draw Social Security or die? A lot of times our families on SSI will switch to SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, and they get different rules. And how do those rules then affect both their work and also the special needs trust and how distributions come out of that. We also want to try to get an idea of like what their monthly expenses are. So I think of this as like, how do you build a retirement plan for the next generation? And so I think that's a real challenge as a parent is we're trying to save enough money for ourselves and live through today and save for our retirement. But now we're also trying to plan not only for the what if happens something soon, but what if we're here a long time and so is our loved one. How do we calculate that and where does that money going to come from? Where's those shortfalls? So as we mentioned before, and I don't want to reiterate, but funding a special needs trust, a lot of times cash, CDs, stocks and bonds, personal property. Bavik mentioned real estate earlier. I think that's a big one where families can leave real estate possibly to a special needs trust in some cases if that's where the child's going to live. And I think that goes back to the letter of intent. Really, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Is your goals to have your child live in your home and have people and individuals and family and supports here? Or is it a facility-based living environment or arrangement? And there's such a different spectrum of living arrangements and then what those costs look like. Organizations that are organizations that do and organizations that don't take state and federal benefits. And so each family is a little bit different. We also see life insurance and sometimes business interests, to believe it or not, which is kind of interesting. Really quick on life insurance, just a lot of times we talk about this because most families do not have enough life and do not have enough money today if something were to happen, both for themselves and their spouse, but especially for leaving for that one loved one in their family that may need an additional support and extra help financially. So it's also immediately available. And if structured right, it's going to be received outside of probate. So you're not going to have to worry about court involvement or getting hung up and not being accessible when it's best needed. And then a lot of times when we have two parents or two individuals that are involved in the caregiving of an individual, we can use joint coverage where we have two people on one policy. And it's really an idea to save money and to reduce costs. So in our industry, what I talk about a lot of times is how do we do a financial plan for your loved one and a financial plan for you? And so a lot of times what we're trying to do is kind of look at like how much money is going to be needed today if something were to happen to mom and dad or the caregiver. If they're not here, that money needs to be here today to support the loved one based on the lifestyle through that letter of intent and through your hopes and dreams of what you want for them. How do we calculate today what that actual need's going to look like? And so throughout that, we also talk a lot about long-term care because I look at, I'm trying to figure out what are the holes in our boat that are going to sink the whole ship and not let us accomplish those financial goals that we have both for ourselves but most importantly for that most vulnerable person in our family. And so I think long-term care and having a vision of what are we going to do about that is another way that I think families need to get planning in place so that they have enough money for themselves and try to do the best job they can to leave money from behind. I think of like in an airplane, the first thing the stewardess says is if the airbags drop, parents put yours on first and then take care of your kids. And it's really important to do that. And so our job is really to look through those eyes of what are the options that are out there? Can I just pay for it myself? There's annuity contracts that exist. There's life insurance. There's traditional long-term care. And sometimes, families aren't in a position to implement one of those. So it comes to other legal strategies that like Vivik's office would implement to help them get to a point where they're not going to lose their assets for the future needs of their loved one. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these things, a couple of these slides. It talks a little bit about how to fund it. But really, I wanted to talk about mistakes families make is really just not planning at all, leaving this workshop or leaving this seminar and not doing anything. So if there's nothing else that you're going to do today, it's probably going to get your legal work started and start working on a letter of intent. The letter of intent, it's free. So you can do that. And I think it goes a long way for the loved ones in your family that you're going to look to kind of step into your role and take on that responsibility, and also letting them know and communicating that with them so that they're not caught off guard. And earlier we talked about uniform gift to minors accounts. A lot of times we'll see people have money in there and that can disrupt benefits or eligibility. I would actually add in life insurance on the child. We'll see a lot of families where they'll get life insurance on the baby and they'll buy that, and by default, a lot of those insurance policies will divert to the insured at the age of 18. And now the insured, the child, is the owner of the policy. And mom and dad walk into the SSI or the Social Security office to apply for benefits, and they get an uh-oh moment. You've got assets in this life insurance policy. So be wary of those things. And also just assuming other family members will take care of a person. I learned the hard way having a conversation, but really talking to family members about, this is what I hope and would like you to do. And are you willing to do that? And giving them the opportunity to think through how that's going to impact their life and having that conversation. And sometimes, as a financial guy, I can tell you, any amount of money is going to be helpful, but having that conversation and knowing that, the financial piece will be taken care of, the legal piece is taken care of, the government funding is there, the trust officers or people to support you are there, I think can give a lot of people, a feeling that this is something that they can take on and maybe reduce some of the anxiety of being in a position that can be scary, I know. And so as a parent, I thought about that a lot. And I think that's something that you need to think about. And also who you're going to trust to oversee the money inside of that imaginary shoebox. That trust is very important. And I think that, thinking through those things and going through those motions can be important as well. So again, start with a letter of intent. Start thinking about people that you trust to watch over the money and to watch over your loved one. Start thinking about people that will provide other overseeing of personal support and caregiving duties, because it is a large job and there's a lot of people, a village to make this happen. And I think working with a qualified special needs planning attorney like Vivek and special needs trust officers like Midwest is very important. I find myself often being the recipient of phone calls from other folks who their advisors or their legal advisors or financial advisors, they just don't know the answers to these things. And I think it's important that you start thinking about who you're going to work with and work with those. Here's my contact information, and I know we're going to give slides out. Thanks again for this evening, and I look forward to any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Vivek and Michael and Casey. We appreciate you and all the wonderful information you've shared. Vivek has been tackling those questions as they came in.
I was just going to say, I think the four remaining questions that are there at the moment, I think Michael would be the best. The first question is, what if there is literally no money left at the end of the month to put away for ourselves, let alone Joey?
I guess it goes back to sitting down and looking at prioritizing a budget and where that money's going and seeing if inside of there that, I always talk about building a financial pyramid, right? So you're starting at the bottom with the foundation of what you have to have, things like health insurance and homeowners and auto insurance, because those could just tear everything down. And then as you move up there, where those monies could be squeezed, I think the quickest and easiest way to create money that otherwise doesn't exist is usually life insurance, right? And so term life insurance is very affordable for most people. If you have your health, as low as $20 to $25 a month. I've seen policies with hundreds of thousands of dollars of death benefit. So I think that would be my starting point with most people, is work through a budget of where's the money going, and are we negative cash flow each month? Are we positive, or where are we at there? And then where are the things that we're doing? I've seen people putting in 10% in their 401k, and they have a $20,000 credit card balance at 22% interest rate, and it just doesn't make any sense. And so, like, literally working through financial kind of literacy 101 of where those priorities are going. But I think the first thing would probably be to some type of life insurance if it's possible, or just start pumping away. $50 a month over a lot of years can actually add up to a lot of money. So that would be my thoughts.
Michael, where can I get a letter of intent template?
Yeah, actually, we have one that we give the families when they work with us. It's not as actually mine to give. It's another organization's that's allowed me as a client that we can give that. But I think if you just did, St. Louis ARC's got one, I think, or the United States ARC, the ARC of the United States. I think if you Google out there, there's a couple organizations that have one. We also have another one through the Academy of Special Needs Planners that we can get as a letter of intent. We can send them as well.
Do I need to ask for a special needs financial planner?
Well, that's like asking a plumber if you need a licensed plumber, right? So to me, I think that someone that really understands the complexities of how all this fits together makes sense to me. A lot of times we'll get times where families, they're very comfortable with their money manager, but they don't really understand what I do. And so they'll pay us like an hourly or a flat fee rate to work with them and to make sure that they're not messing up. So we never want to push anybody away or give them, say, no, we're not going to work with you unless we manage or you hire us full time. But what I've found is my ability to kind of help guide people is mostly because I'm a parent, and I've kind of walked in those shoes with government benefits, and I've been in probably 80 workshops with you, right? So I think I've heard enough of these pieces to know, enough to get families through. So self-serving to answer it that way a little.
Well, I've heard you answer this question before, and I like your answer. So how to calculate the future financial needs of my special needs kid?
Yeah, well, and I do say it starts with the letter of intent a little bit, right? Because I used Dylan as my example. Dylan, he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't walk, talk, sit up, roll over. He needed 24-hour, 7-day-a-week care. And so in our letter of intent, and then that led into my financial plan, was that he would stay in our home. But what I did know is that wasn't enough hours through Medicaid and through the government benefit services to be able to fill the gap. And so we were able to kind of walk through what that rate would look like, what we think we would get, and kind of come back into a number throughout, what those needs that we knew he had. It's literally like a budget that you're working with the financial plan for that loved one. And in our case, again, I said it earlier, we assume that need is started today. And with, in cost of living and inflation, along with, their longevity, every year you're here is 1 year less of money that they're going to need. We can really get a real accurate assumption as to how much is going to be needed. And then we can work through that as well. As like now that we know the amount, how do we fund it? And so sometimes funding it is possible 100%. And other times, it's just as best you can do. And like I said earlier, all money I've ever seen in a special needs trust makes a difference. I've got a guy with $10,000, and I laugh because the interest rates are finally high enough on a money market where his $10,000 is like $400 a year, which breaks down, and he gets like $30 a month or something. But he goes to this McDonald's with an arcade, and he spends the whole $35 in a whole day. And for him, he loves it, and that's what makes him happy. And so anything a family can do to make sure that money doesn't get, I think we talked about this earlier, doesn't end up in a payback provision, or it's just lost and gone. And there's so many tools with the legal work, with the MOABLE, with the Midwest Special Needs Trust that families really have at their disposal. And I think mistakes they make is thinking it's very expensive when it really can be done really affordable for the right person. There's always a fit, right?
Thank you again to our presenters and to everyone attending. Have a wonderful evening.